It started as a normal evening until the heavy knock on my front door shattered the silence. I was in my home office, reviewing some security reports, when the sudden noise made me pause. I glanced at the clock on my desk. 11:47 p.m. My instincts, sharpened by years of working for Homeland Security, immediately kicked in. No good news ever comes knocking at that hour. The knock came again, more forceful this time. I set my coffee down, took a deep breath, and stood up. Moving quietly, I approached the door. My heart rate steady, but my senses on full alert. Something felt off. People don't just show up at someone's house at this hour, unless it's an emergency or a setup. I peered through the peephole, and what I saw sent a wave of suspicion coursing through me. Two men stood on my porch, both dressed in black tactical gear, their faces partially shadowed by the dim porch light. They had badges pinned to their chests, but something about them didn't look right. Their uniforms were plain, no visible unit patches, no department names. Their belts looked overloaded with gear, but not the kind law enforcement usually carries. And the biggest red flag, no name tags. One of the men, the taller one with a shaved head, stepped closer and pounded on the door again. "Mr. Carter, open up. We have a warrant for your arrest." His voice was gruff, commanding, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I scanned their posture, their stance. They were standing like wannabe cops, not like trained professionals. The shorter one, stockier with a beard, kept glancing around, shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. He wasn't sure about this. Finally, I decided to play along. I unlocked the door, but didn't open it all the way. "Who are you?" I asked flatly, my expression unreadable. The bald one held up a piece of paper, but he flashed it so quickly that I couldn't read a word. "Official warrant. Step outside now." I raised an eyebrow. "An arrest warrant? From who? Over what? For what charge?" I asked, making it clear I wasn't intimidated. "Violation of HOA regulations. Failure to comply with community standards," he said, his voice laced with authority. I almost laughed. An arrest warrant for HOA violations. That's not how the law works. My neighborhood's HOA had been a thorn in my side for years, constantly trying to enforce ridiculous rules, everything from dictating the shade of my lawn furniture to fining people for parking in their own driveways. But this was a new level of insanity. I didn't move. "Let me see that warrant again." The bearded one hesitated, exchanging a quick look with his partner. That's when I knew. They were bluffing. "You don't need to see it," the bald one snapped. "Step out now, or we'll come in and get you." I took a slow, steady breath. I had options. I could slam the door shut and call real law enforcement. But part of me wanted to see how far these guys would take it. So I did something unexpected. I stepped back. "All right," I said, nodding toward them. "Come on in." That threw them off. Their confidence wavered for just a moment, but then they took the bait. Big mistake. The second they crossed my threshold, I moved fast. The bald one reached for something at his belt, maybe cuffs, maybe a weapon, but he never got the chance. With a practiced motion, I grabbed his wrist, twisted it hard, and slammed him face down onto my floor. He grunted in pain, but before he could react, I had my knee in his back, pinning him in place. The bearded guy barely had time to process what was happening before I turned my gaze to him. He froze, hands half raised in uncertainty. I could see the moment fear set in. "Don't," I warned, my voice dangerously calm. He hesitated. Then his hand twitched toward his belt. I was faster. In one smooth motion, I reached into my pocket and pulled out something he wasn't expecting, my Homeland Security badge. The second he saw it, his face drained of color. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I said, my voice like steel. The bald guy groaned beneath me. "Man, we were just following orders." "Whose orders?" I demanded, keeping my weight pressed down on him. The HOA president. She said you were a problem, that we just had to scare you into compliance. I almost laughed. Scare me? These guys had no idea who they were dealing with. I tightened my grip. You're impersonating law enforcement. That's a federal crime. You know what happens to people who do that. The bearded guy swallowed hard. We didn't mean any harm, man. It was just a job. She hired us to. To what? I cut him off. To intimidate a federal officer. To make me comply with some fake HOA rules. What exactly was the endgame here? He had no answer. Because there wasn't one. I secured them both, keeping a watchful eye on their movements. Then I reached for my phone and called the real police. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I have 2 suspects restrained in my home. They attempted an illegal arrest while impersonating officers. You're gonna want to get here fast. The operator was quick to respond. Are you in any immediate danger? Not anymore, I said, glancing down at the 2 fools on my floor. Minutes later, the sound of real sirens filled the night. A row of patrol cars lit up my street, the flashing red and blue lights casting an eerie glow through my windows. My neighbors, roused from their sleep, stepped out onto their porches, watching as uniformed officers swarmed my yard. When the first real cop stepped inside and saw the scene, 2 men zip-tied on my floor, my badge still visible on my belt. His eyebrows shot up. What the hell happened here? The officer asked, glancing between me and the 2 detained men. I gave him a brief rundown. His expression darkened with every word. You're telling me, he said slowly, that your HOA president hired fake cops to arrest you. That's exactly what I'm telling you, I confirmed. The 2 men tried to defend themselves, sputtering half-baked excuses, but it was too late. The moment real law enforcement ran their IDs, and found no official records linking them to any agency, it was over. They were cuffed and hauled off in the back of a squad car. But the real fun started the next morning. I woke up to the sound of my phone blowing up with messages. News had spread like wildfire. The local news station was already covering the story. An HOA president caught hiring fake police officers to enforce illegal rules. And the best part, my doorbell camera had recorded everything. The footage showed the 2 men arriving, their poorly disguised intimidation tactics, and their eventual takedown inside my home. Within hours, the video was circulating online, racking up thousands of views. The HOA president, Mrs. Lynn Patterson, was arrested later that afternoon. Turns out, she'd been running a scam for years, illegally fining residents, threatening them with eviction, and even faking violations to seize properties. She thought she was untouchable, until she tried to mess with the wrong guy. I sat on my porch later that day, sipping my morning coffee, watching the neighborhood's corrupt leadership get dismantled before my eyes. The once feared HOA board was now facing criminal charges. And as for me, I went back to business as usual. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my line of work, it's this: some people know the law, and some people are the law. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. News spread like wildfire. The moment the real police took those fake officers away, word had started trickling out, and by sunrise, it was as if someone had set off a bomb of rumors, theories, and whispered conversations across the entire community. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and watched as my neighbors cautiously emerged from their homes, gathering in small clusters, glancing toward my house, and then toward the HOA office down the street. I could feel the shift in the air. A storm of reckoning was coming. My phone buzzed with a notification. Local news station reporting HOA scandal. I tapped the link and grinned as I watched the broadcast. In a shocking turn of events, a local homeowner, who also happens to work for Homeland Security, was the target of an illegal arrest by 2 men hired by his own HOA. The individuals, who were impersonating law enforcement officers, have been taken into custody, and sources say multiple charges are being filed against the HOA leadership. We have exclusive footage from the homeowner's doorbell camera, which has already gone viral overnight. I scrolled down to the comment section, and it was already a war zone. People were furious. HOA horror stories flooded in, people sharing their own encounters with corrupt neighborhood associations, others calling for the immediate dissolution of HOAs altogether. And then there were the ones laughing at the sheer stupidity of it all. Imagine trying to fake arrest a guy from Homeland Security. These HOA people are out of their minds. She really thought she could just do whatever she wanted. Oh, I hope she rots in jail. The way he took them down in his living room. Perfect. Instant karma. I wasn't a fan of attention, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying this just a little. The real fun, however, was about to begin. An hour later, just as I was about to head back inside, I spotted a black SUV pulling up in front of the HOA office. A group of serious-looking men in suits stepped out, moving with precision. They weren't local police. They were feds. I smirked. Took them long enough. I grabbed my jacket and made my way down the street, where a small crowd had already gathered near the HOA office. People were whispering, watching intently as federal agents entered the building. Moments later, a familiar voice rang out. "What is the meaning of this? You have no right to be here." There she was. Lynn Patterson, the self-appointed queen of this community, the woman who had spent years terrorizing homeowners with absurd fines and arbitrary rules, was now standing in the doorway of the HOA office, facing down a group of federal agents. Her blonde bob was as stiff as ever, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, but I could see the panic in her eyes. One of the agents stepped forward, flashing his badge. "Ma'am, we're executing a federal warrant for your arrest." "Step aside." Her face drained of color. "This is outrageous." "On what grounds?" "Conspiracy to commit fraud, illegal enforcement of fines, misappropriation of funds, and hiring unlicensed personnel to impersonate law enforcement officers," the agent listed off coolly. "Would you like me to continue?" I watched as her entire world crumbled in real time. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to argue, but she had nothing. She had no way out. "You can't do this," she stammered. "This is a mistake." One of the agents turned to another officer. "Cuff her." The second those handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, the entire crowd erupted into cheers. I had to admit, it was a satisfying sight. The moment she was escorted out of the building, the floodgates opened. Homeowners rushed forward, finally emboldened, finally free to speak out without fear of retaliation. I stood back and watched as the real scope of the HOA's corruption unraveled before my eyes. People started coming forward with stories, documents, and proof of fraud. One man revealed that Lynn had fined him over $5,000 for violating lawn color standards. Another woman said she had been threatened with eviction for parking in her own driveway. Several homeowners discovered that their HOA fees had been misused for years, funding Lynn's personal expenses, including vacations, expensive furniture, and even a luxury SUV. The more they dug, the worse it got. By the afternoon, federal agents had seized all the HOA's financial records, and it was clear this was going to turn into a massive legal battle. Lynn wasn't just going to lose her position, she was going to prison. As for me, I wasn't surprised when a few reporters showed up at my doorstep, cameras rolling, eager to interview the man who had taken down an entire corrupt HOA, with nothing but patience, a well-placed doorbell camera, and a solid right hook. "Mr. Carter, how did you realize something was wrong?" one reporter asked, microphone in my face. I shrugged. Badges don't shine like plastic toys if they're real. The
interview was short, but it didn't take long before the story exploded online. Within hours, my face was everywhere. News articles, viral tweets, even memes. One meme showed a picture of Lynn's mugshot with the caption, "If only she'd read the HOA rulebook before committing federal crimes." Another had a picture of me standing next to my front door with the words Homeland Security, the ultimate HOA enforcer. I laughed. Internet culture was brutal, but more than anything, I felt relief. The HOA's stranglehold over this neighborhood was finally broken. A week later, the remaining board members resigned in disgrace, and a new group of actual homeowners took over. People who actually cared about the community instead of using it as their personal kingdom. Lynn's case moved fast. The sheer volume of evidence against her was overwhelming. She took a plea deal, admitting to multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The two fake cops, they weren't so lucky. Impersonating law enforcement is a serious federal offense. They both got 8 years. And me, I went back to living my life, peacefully, without HOA threats, without ridiculous fines, without someone trying to dictate how I lived on my own property. One evening, as I was sitting on my porch, sipping a beer, my neighbor, an older guy named Frank, walked up and clapped me on the shoulder. "You really shook things up, Carter," he said with a grin. I smiled, taking another sip. "Some people know the law," I said, watching the sunset. "And some people are the law." Frank chuckled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I smirked. "Don't send fake cops to my house, and we'll get along just fine." He laughed, raising his beer in salute before heading home. For the first time in years, this neighborhood felt like home again. No corrupt HOA, no intimidation, just peace, and that was the best victory of all.